I had to show you this because this is really important, because everybody talks about trauma, trauma, trauma. What Carlin's prospective work shows is that, in fact, the biggest predictor of, let's say, complex PTSD, borderline personality, chronic suicidality, and all that stuff, is a lack of synchrony between you and your mom at age 3. And that leads to it. It's the most powerful predictor. And then what the research shows is that if you have a lousy, insecure relationship with your parent, then you're much more likely to get abused. But the abuse is a function of the disorganized attachment. So for all those people in the room who say, what about complex trauma? That is the issue with complex trauma. It's not primarily about a memory, about the bad things that happened to you, but there was nobody there to protect you and to make you feel safe. And that is a huge issue for us, and I wish we had another day, because I have a whole bunch of videotapes on how you might treat with that, but we don't have time for that, but I can show you some stuff. And so I'm going to skip some of these issues, which are all very interesting. And so we set up this National Child Traumatic Stress Network. We collect data. And we have data on 22,000 children in America. And we look at what sort of trauma have they suffered from. And it turns out the most common trauma is childhood emotional abuse. Loss of a caregiver. Caregiver goes off to work, goes off to the colonies, goes to the army. An impaired caregiver, depressed, suicidal, etc. Domestic violence, childhood sexual abuse, childhood neglect, childhood physical abuse. So pervasive throughout society is all these different sorts of trauma. But what they all have in common is, when we look at their symptomatology, is that all of these things that are supposed to be diagnoses all occur at the same time. All these kids have difficulty with emotion regulation, and they have problems with attention and concentration. So you can call them ADHD, or you can call them bipolar, or you can call them something else, because they all are just words that are superficial labels that you give on behaviors. But what we find, all of these things go together. These are not comorbid conditions. The whole organism is messed up by it. They don't know how to form intimate relationships. They hate themselves. They despise themselves and do self-destructive things. So we have data on 20,000 kids, and then my own group gets together and says, we need a new diagnosis in DSM called developmental trauma disorder, which you guys still call complex trauma. And complex trauma is when you get abused in your own family, and as a result, you have problems with emotion regulation, with concentration, with calming yourself down, and being able to get along with people. We have data on 20,000 children we saw ourselves, and 200,000 kids from the literature. Very solid. And a few months later, we get response back from the American Psychiatric Association and said, that was just too complex. 200,000 kids and all these different things that go on. No, this we can't really pay attention to this. But if in the coming months you collect data on the genetics of this disorder and the epigenetics of this disorder, the cultural variations of this disorder, the familial patterns of disorder, the blah, 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 all the things that we don't know about anything in psychiatry, then we will be considered. And I get that letter, and the first thing I do is to look on the internet if I can find a scuba diving shop for sale in the Caribbean, because I want to get the hell out of this field because it's so crazy. But the problem is I have students, and students have some good things and some bad things. The good things, they're all very smart. They're very motivated. They work like crazy. They know their statistics. They know their science. They work like crazy, and they're oftentimes pleasant to look at. That's the good things. The bad things, they're hopelessly naive. And they think if you find all the data, everybody will believe you, and the world will become a better place. So I have a revolt of my postdoc. Said, no, we're going to interview 20,000 kids in the coming 4 weeks. And we did. And all these people didn't sleep for day and night, showers. They all smelled bad. They were just working. And at the end, in 30 days, we submitted all these data to the American Psychiatric Association. Very good, solid data. And then the answer comes back. And it says, the consensus was that there was just too little evidence at this time to include developmental trauma disorder in the DSM-5. The notion that early childhood adverse experiences lead to substantial developmental disruptions is more clinical intuition than a research-based fact. This statement is often made, but cannot be backed up by prospective studies, except for the study by Carl Elias Ruth, and the study by Frank Putnam, and the study by Dante Cicchetta, and the study by Alan Shrove. We have huge amount of data, but we choose not to look at it. So there still is no diagnosis for the majority of the people who we all treat. And we all keep labeling them with crazy labels. And so in America, we have a wide choice of diagnosing our patients. We can call them PTSD, disruptive mood dysregulation, reactive attachment disorder, dissociative identity disorder, non-suicidal self-intermittent exposure disorder, disinhibited social or positional defiance disorder, conduct disorder, or borderline personality disorder. Take your pick, because they all meet criteria for all these diagnoses. So please don't ask me another question about the overlap between borderline personality and disruptive personality, because it's all bullshit. Okay? So, so I've spent a good amount of my life trying to get some reasonableness, and the ball is in your court. Don't continue to live in the world where we talk bullshit. And if you have people who suffer from certain things, call it what it is, and don't call it bipolar 2 disorder or ADHD with a comorbid something or another, because that is not what people have. People have profound disrupted attachment relationships and biological relationships that is much more complex than all that simple stuff.